Hina Khan, I would like to start off this conversation by having you share your woman owned story.
Well, I would say that when I think about entrepreneurship and what I've built, I didn't realize that I was an entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is that I started in psychotherapy. And you were doing our training in psychotherapy, and then there's a part where you're in supervision. And when you're in supervision, you're receiving clients from the college, and it's at a lower rate because you're in supervision. So that's how I was receiving clients. It was great. I loved it. We learned nothing about business in my psychotherapy training. It was all about theory and being with people, and it was incredible. And then when I graduated, it kind of hit me that, oh, I have a business. Like I've got to receive clients. I need to figure this out. But can I tell you, Eleanor, it did not dawn on me. If you asked me what I did, I was an entrepreneur. And so I think for me, if I think of woman owned, it's when I really stepped into being an exceptional salesperson and loving what I'm doing, being of service, and really embodying being a salesperson because I did not see myself as that. I did not think about that aspect of psychotherapy. And then, of course, my coaching business. Does that answer your question?
It really does. And tell us a little bit more about your path to see yourself as a salesperson, given that it wasn't how you maybe initially saw yourself. It wasn't necessarily a part of your training in psychotherapy. What helped you cross that divide in identity to start to see yourself as a salesperson and embrace that aspect of entrepreneurship?
I love that you use the word identity because you can't outperform your self image. And it really dawned on me that I'm a salesperson, even though I avoided it. I hated that term. I had such limiting beliefs around it, a lot of negative beliefs. I'm sure some of your listeners can relate to this. Like, say, car salesperson is what kind of comes to mind. And I thought, I don't want to be that. But then when I understood what sales is, and sales is service. And if I'm not sharing how somebody can be my client, I cannot serve them. So I can sit on my high horse and be very righteous about not being a salesperson. And that's really great, but I'm not going to be helping anybody. So that sort of defeats the process. So I realized when I wanted to build my business and impact more people, that sales was a key component of it. And then for me to be effective, I had to change the way I felt about sales. Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to connecting with that identity. So, creating an identity and having a self image shift of being a powerful salesperson, being the CEO and founder of my business, which was very different. It was a very different self image from being a psychotherapist. So, it was being the CEO and founder of my business, creating incredible impact, and in that moment, it was as a psychotherapist, and then it evolves into other vehicles from that.
Now, I understand that there is a lot to creating intentional identity, to stepping into a new identity. And this, of course, is a foundation of the work that you do with so many extraordinary humans, some of whom are I know well and are in our the woman owned community also.
Mm.
But I would love if you could share a little bit about some of the practices or some of the most fundamental things that you did to embrace that identity and to shift that identity from a straight up psychotherapist to a psychotherapist and a powerhouse CEO, an impactful salesperson, an inspirational leader. Like what did you actually do to transform your identity that helped the most? What were the things that helped the most?
The things that helped me the most was who I was surrounding myself, what I was listening to, and um, the type of material that I was kind of consuming. Because every business has its own paradigm and set of beliefs. And psychotherapy is no different. What I mean by that is that if I was going to be gathering with a lot of other psychotherapists, we would start to be really talking about even things like trading time for money. Like the only way to grow my practice is by working more hours, which I did not desire to do. And but in that world, that's the paradigm of it, especially before COVID, where it was frowned upon to see clients virtually. So it was really getting into different circles, different rooms where the conversation was different and the conversation about sales and money was very natural. And what you would notice is that it's a very different language then. Not only that, but that's where you're getting ideas. That's so what I did was I started to get into rooms with other business people as opposed to other rooms with other psychotherapists. That would have been the first step that I did, and then again, it was the consuming of the material and really understanding what sales is, and then working with a mentor in that space, and starting to tap into what it is that I would love that is beyond what a traditional psychotherapist psychotherapy what a traditional psychotherapy practice looks like. But I could only tap into that when I also started to move into different circles. So I think that, your community, woman owned, that community that you have and other communities, we have a community is so important. And the beautiful thing about it now is honestly there's no excuse because you can listen to a podcast which doesn't cost you anything. There are so many ways, but it can feel like you're betraying a part of yourself when you do that. But I can tell you that when you're with different people, even the people that you work with that are going from 250,000 to 2 million, the language around money is different. The actions are different. The sales is different and how they feel about their business is different than when you're in a particular paradigm about an industry.
It does feel like you're leaving a part of yourself behind, or I can relate to that. And I can also relate, well, in my journey, I would also sometimes feel that I was leaving people behind in a
Yeah.
way, in the sense that as I started to step into different circles where they talked about money differently, they talked about sales differently. And I too needed that. Like it was very, very important to me because it wasn't something that I had a lot of experience with before that. I did feel that I needed to shed an old identity or leave things behind, including sometimes relationships that just felt that they no longer served me. I'm curious, if you have any sort of thoughts or insight on that, because I suspect that you see this all the time,
All the
in the work
time.
that you do with folks. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right, Eleanor. And that's a part of the process where people will not change. They will stay where they are to not offend anybody about wanting more. And it's the freaking saddest thing that I see, especially with women. We feel like we're being selfish or that there's something wrong with it when I think it's selfish to stay small. And when you do this, when you do step out, you inspire others because you show them what's possible for them. So it's to really understand that people are in your life and in your journey, sometimes for all of your seasons, and sometimes for some of your seasons. And I think where we get caught up is that we feel like we think we're better than somebody else. And that's not the case. We are all equal. You're not better than anybody. I'm not better than anybody. So what I started to understand is that we're just at different levels. We're just at different places. And just like there are people in high school that I went to that I don't connect with, that I thought maybe at that time we would be friends forever, it doesn't make sense for where I am now. So one way that you can also think about it is that from the place of the goal, from your place of a multi seven-figure business, are these conversations that you are engaged in? Is this where your attention is? Would this be happening when you're playing at that level? And that will give you a lot of clarity. And it has nothing to do with you feeling better than somebody else. Or the other piece that I think is very hard for people, and Eleanor, is the judgment that they don't want people to feel, they don't want others to be judging them for this. So again, we'll keep ourselves small to make others uncomfortable. And that's a choice. And you've got to realize that if that's what you're choosing, you are actually choosing it and you have to take 100% responsibility for it. Um,
Mm.
but it's not a fun way to live. It's not gonna grow
It's,
your business. Like, you literally
you know,
cannot like, it's so much, and, I think you probably see this even with strategies and operations and processes. Are you gonna keep a process that you use to get you to 6 figures for multiple seven figures. There are things that you use that were perfect, it got you there, but you need a different operating system to be able to handle the growth of the business and what it is that you wanna create. Well, I would invite you to think about that with people as well.
Mm. Yeah, it's been, to me, one of the most powerful things about growth has been the ability to make peace with letting some things go in order to preserve the most imaginative unfolding of myself, and kind of reaching a potential. It's just this constant um, process of allowing ourselves to grow and allowing ourselves to let go of things and to have a certain sense of peace with that without making it mean that you think you're better or that, so and so is judging you or that kind of thing. I mean, I think this conversation that we're having is so critical for, for people to kind of listen to. When you think about your growth, was there a period that was particularly hard where
Oh
you
my
really
gosh.
were like, "Oh, wow, I'm really letting go of stuff at this phase?" Like, I'm so
You know,
curious.
it's so interesting. I would say there was a lot of letting go. We switched up our team and things like that, this year in 2024. Um, when we're recording this in 2024, there's growth in letting go at every stage. I don't think that
Yeah.
ends. It's just for me, I am comfortable with it. My bandwidth for it has increased, and now I know what it is. So I think, because you were talking about people, there are people in your circle, friendships that may not be part of your next level. I think where it can be very challenging as a leader, it's when people on your team
Oh,
were right? It's like
totally.
that was the team that got you to a certain place, but again, it's not everyone on your team wants to go where you're going. So I think that that is the biggest place where I've learned the most about myself. It's been a beautiful teaching for me about
Yeah.
myself and who I am being and being in integrity, and what does that really mean to show up like that? Having
Yeah.
difficult conversations, crucial conversations. It is
I
something
so
that
agree.
is just at different levels.
It, totally. And I've been through it in terms of, fantastic humans who
Ah,
really were a fantastic fit for the business at certain stages. And then the feeling is like, it's almost like there's a drag. That's you can
yes.
sense as a leader, you're like, oh, it's like, who's got their oar in the water? Like
Yeah.
who's and I never and it's not actually about the person, it's about teams and fit and where you're going and how it works. And so there's definitely that feeling. I've also had periods in business growth where, and I actually see this quite a bit with entrepreneurs where the business is growing and then you know that you have to kind of make switches inside the team and you don't quite get it right. So I definitely went through a period where it was like a 6 month period where I had quite a bit of turnover in my team.
Yes.
And it was hard and I really doubted myself as a leader. I thought this must mean I'm a bad leader. I let people down. There were a lot of kind of stories around it. And I felt, I actually felt quite a bit of shame about it. And it's interesting, after that, I started to understand it better and I started to see other entrepreneurs who had been through the same thing. It was very helpful. But that, even letting go of the identity that a leader always has to get it right, was another thing.
Yes.
I thought that's what a leader was supposed to do. And I realized it was suffocating me.
Yes. Yes. And it's messy. It's messy. And sometimes, like, at each level, we don't have a playbook necessarily for that level. We've got a playbook for the past level because we've done that, but we are the first time at maybe multi seven figures. We are at the first time of having a team, having employees, and all of the things that come to that, even the feeling of responsibility for somebody else's livelihood. And so, we're figuring it out as we're doing it. And so I think it happens, honestly, you're shedding things at every single level.
Yeah. Totally. Okay. So we're actually, and I love that we sort of naturally evolved to talking about team because it's something that you've done in a really, in an amazing way. So you've built this very successful seven-figure business actually without full-time employees. So we're going to dive into that because I think that's very appealing to a lot of people who want to have and exercise a certain degree of flexibility in how they build their team. So we're going to get into that. But before we do that, I'd love to kind of get a little bit of, provide our listeners with a little bit of context. Tell us about the business today, like who you serve, how you serve them, just a little bit of context around your business so that as we start to get into how you built the team to help you create this business, they understand what it is that you've built.
Thank you. Yes, so we serve female entrepreneurs mainly, CEOs and executives as well, but we definitely work in the female entrepreneur space with female founders. And for me, my focus is very much on self image, identity, and mindset. So I'm a peak performance mindset coach. I resigned from psychotherapy completely. And that was also another evolution of letting go of that identity and moving full time into coaching. But, for me, I feel like my purpose has always been to impact people, to love and serve and transform. And it happens in different ways. And so this is what I want your listeners to realize too, is that there's going to be many different iterations of us. At one point, psychotherapy was the vehicle, and now coaching is the vehicle, and books and podcasts and TV and the vehicle even within the coaching. We've got group, we've got some elite masterminds, and then we've got one-on-one, and that can always change as well. So when we work with all different types of business owners, and it's really creating the identity and the image that's a match to the goal so that you can have those crucial conversations, so you can bring the right people in. And there's certain things that and it's around taking action right away. There's something we call event action around that, and being in integrity by knowing who you are. So those are the people that we serve, and we serve them in a variety of ways for whatever is the right entry point for them.
So it's a mix of, it could be one-on-one, it could be like courses and programs, and it could be kind of mastermind. Those are sort of some of the things in the mix of your offerings.
Yes, and I would say probably our signature program that was born out of the pandemic is our Amplify You the Rise calls. So when lockdown happened, and again, we don't have a playbook, I thought it was going to be
Yeah.
2 weeks. I don't know about you, Eleanor.
I
It
know.
was just like
I
when I
did. I
went
was
to
like, oh my God.
Yeah. It was like when I went into marriage therapy. I thought the same thing. I thought, what do we think? What are we doing here? Like about 4 sessions and we should be good. It was longer, just like lockdown was longer. And so this is what I want everybody to think about. It's like this question can be a game changer, and that is how can I be of service? And then everything else will flow from that. And I thought, gosh, how can I be of service to my clients in this time of uncertainty? Because uncertainty is scary. We're all of a sudden wearing masks and all of these things. And I thought, well, I could invite them into my morning call, because what a morning call does for me, and not everyone has to have a morning routine, but it puts you in a peak state. And then that state over time will last longer and longer and longer. And then that's who you are. And then when you are making decisions about your teams, when you are making decisions, financial decisions in your company, you're looking at it from a peak place, not a place of default stories and standards. And because your self image, your identity is made up of your stories and standards. So every day I create myself. I create myself of who I be in my business, with my husband, with my kids. And so I thought, oh, maybe 2 people will come. Well, I guess no one was going anywhere, and we had like 30 people, and I've done it every day. We've had breaks since 2020. It'll come on to 5 years of Monday to Friday morning calls. Eleanor, I thought I was going to do it for a week, but this thing, people just loved it. So that became our signature program, and it is a place that many people start, and it's live Monday to Friday.
Mm,
But that came out of a way of thinking,
yeah.
which is why we
Well, I
must
love
learn
what
how
you
to think.
said. Yeah, I love what you said. Our identity is a function of our stories and standards.
Yeah.
Like That's really powerful. And as I reflect, so true, so true.
Well, Eleanor,
Okay.
it's even your stories about can you lead a team? It's even your
Yes.
stories around can I manage 7 figures? Like, it's even your story, your own money stories. Like, I have so many people that are scared to hire because they have a story about themselves as a leader, or one thing happened, Eleanor, and now they freaking defined their whole way, their whole business from it. Well, I can't hire. I'm bad at hiring. As opposed to learning from it and saying, okay, but do you want to? Do you want to do it in a different way? So the stories are critical in the because it's our actions, whether we're hiring, whether we're raising prices, whatever we're doing, whatever we're creating is coming from the story. So what are you saying to yourself?
Yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. So, and a lot of times your stories are invisible to you. They masquerade as a fact. I'll give you an example. I was talking with some colleagues recently, and we were talking about how we build our teams. And someone was saying, "Look, I don't know if I should go full time or I should go contractors. People tell me like, how much are you making and how big of a team do you have?" And there was one guy, he's like, I'm making 5 million bucks. I have 7 full-time employees. This is works. This is great. Though as you start to hire people, your profits really go down. And then there's another guy, he's like, well, I'm actually making 20 million. We have a 40% profit margin. I'm away for 2 months right now. Like, I don't know that it has to be. So each of them had their own story about what the right way was to build a team and and each of them were living out their story quite successfully. So I really see what you're saying. I think there's so many different ways, that we can choose to do things. So the way that you have chose to do something, so you have built your team with uh, primarily a contract team versus like full-time employees. So I guess I wanted to kind of ask you, was this like a happy accident? Did it happen organically, or was it a philosophy and an approach about how you wanted to build your business?
It's such a great question if it was a happy accident or approach. Maybe a mix of both, Eleanor. So I created a 7-figure business with a VA and a contractor, no employees. I have some employees now, but I didn't at that time. And so one of my
Did you say
philosophies,
a contractor and a VA? A
I would
contractor
say,
and a VA.
yeah, like, well, a
Yeah.
VA, maybe a few contractors for different
Yep.
things, like,
Yep.
someone I contracted it to support me in social media. But all of those things I did late. I probably did it a little bit later, even bringing people in for certain things. So for me, I think one of my philosophies is to create a life you love and a business you love through ease, joy, and fun. So one of the things I always ask myself is what would feel easy? And really, the VA, it was working. Now, here's what's going to happen when you start to work this way and something is working, you start to question why is it working? And you doubt. You have doubts because other people are telling you it should be a lot harder and it shouldn't be working. You act this is wrong in some way. And so it was really staying true to myself that allowed me to do it. And it's so interesting, Eleanor, because I love this conversation because I'm thinking back. You're making me remember things. I think when we reached 7 figures, I started to feel like, well, now I should have employees for sure. Like I absolutely should. And so we started to bring just a couple people in, and it's always good because then you know what you like and you also know what doesn't work for you. And but I think what happened for me, Eleanor, was that at that point we grew from a team perspective way too fast. Just we're
That's
bringing
so
people
hard.
in
Oh,
just way too fast, and
everybody
that was
who's
my
done that,
biggest
you're
lesson.
like, oh, it's so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know about you, Eleanor, if you've ever felt this way, but what happened was Now because now you're focusing on certain aspects of your business. With when it was the VA, a couple of contractors and me, I was really in my zone of genius. I was in my cake of the business, like what I loved about it. And of course, there are going to be things that you don't like. That's not your favorite thing to do, but you do it. But in this, now with all of the people, there was like getting caught up in all of that too fast, too fast. One of the things I say to my clients when they talk about having different goals, I'm always like, think of it like spinning plates. Get one going and then bring the other. Well, I did not do that.
Yeah.
I was trying to juggle a lot. I was spinning so many plates and there were some crashes.
And do you think
And
that was sort
yeah,
of driven by what you that this idea, well, because I'm here, I have a
yes.
story about what my business should look like at this phase. And so you're like adhering to the story versus adhering to the truth of what had been working well for you.
Yes, and Eleanor, I don't know if this has happened to you, but then you bring people on and you bring them on, and I'm not one to micromanage. So if they're suggesting things, to me, it's a yes. And if it's like, you know what, we need more people and we need to hire more and more, I'm like, okay, well, that's why I hired you. So if you feel this way, and I think what happened was I kind of lost grasp of the business in a way, and I was giving too much into the hands of other people. And that's what I would say, looking back, was a great learning for me. And in doing so, there were things that were put in place that wouldn't be the way that I would do it, and I think I started to fall out of love with it because I wasn't in the place that I loved of the business, and all of a sudden, it started to feel hard. And the because of what I teach, I'm just like, okay, no, what would feel easy? Now, what would feel easy is not always the easy thing to do because you still have to go through a
Yes.
process. So I think you're right, Eleanor. What happened was I built a business in an unusual way that was unconventional. When I reached a certain point, I thought, no, now this is the point that you bring people in. I built that too fast, too quickly, bringing people in without getting one person set up, in really the right way, aligned with my core values. And there were some crashes that happened as a result, and I learned a lot about myself. And so since then, we have restructured the team, and I am so much happier. But
You
I had
know,
to go through it.
yeah, I agree because I think so I totally have been through something very similar. Totally have been through something very similar. Um, and I think like enjoy having full-time staff. I knew that I wanted help, but to your point, I had this image of the type of person that I should hire and in reality, I do think that every business is there's lots of principles and patterns, but every business is going to look very different, and it's basically because you as the leader have a vision and you're trying to fulfill a vision, and the way that that comes together, the ingredients that create that vision will look very different for each person. And I do think that there's a period where, as you're maturing as a leader into the person who can actually, who's capable of actually creating that vision, like as you're stepping into that identity, I have certainly felt as you're sort of molding and shifting, you can be a little bit vulnerable to other people's ideas or things that don't actually fit the vision of what you're trying to create. Not because they're of any malice on their part, but it's just not, it doesn't fit with the vision, and you can end up building something that is not what you want. I had to go through that too, um and and kind of restructure things, and I'm much happier now. But
Yeah.
like I'm curious, when you so you had sort of those full-time roles and then you restructured. So
Mhm.
tell us about the restructuring part, because again, super successful business, primarily with contractors. What
Mhm.
does that look like today? Like what are sort of the functions of your business, and give us a bit of a sense of like the types of contractors that come together to create the team that delivers this awesome business?
And so much of it, Eleanor, is really new right now. So we've got right now 3 full-time employees, and I've got my VP of sales that's not an employee. And then
Yep.
we've got other contractors like consultants that I just started working with as well. And then also another consultant for the podcast and things like that. And I really, really love it because the team itself, they I'm not micromanaging them. They have it figured out. And here's the beautiful thing is that, Eleanor, there's times where I'm like, when did you guys do this? Like, there is so much inner initiative on their part because they have freedom within their role to be in their zone of genius. So, one of the things that I did was I wanted to make sure when I was restructuring that every person is in their zone of genius and not doing something that is not. Yes, like all of us, there may be some things that they have to step into, as opposed to seeing what we needed and saying, okay, who could do that? Which is kind of what was happening before. So now
Yes.
everybody on the team is in their zone of genius and they are so happy. Also, I'm not attached to them staying with me forever. So, team, if you're listening to this, because everyone
Yeah.
should have their own goals, everyone should
It's
live their
true.
life. And if my goal and what I desire is part of it, amazing. And if it isn't, amazing. Like, that's what we teach, that's what we do. So, what I would say the biggest shift was making sure everybody on my team is in their zone of genius and not doing things that are the drag, that are dragging them in their role. And that's really allowed us to elevate, I would say.
Mm. And how do you decide in your company what roles make sense to be full-time versus what roles make sense to be on more of a contract basis?
I don't know that I have it figured out exactly, Eleanor. I think
Mm.
it's really so part of it has to do with the person that we're hiring on the team. What would
Yeah.
they love? And if it's that they would really love to actually be employed, so, we've got some people on the team that with where their family is at right now, they would prefer to be employed. That's what works for them. And so sometimes it's a collaborative decision. There are some times where we just know we really need to have full access to somebody's genius, and we've got to be able to really integrate them. They've got to be living, breathing everything that we do, and that they are really a part of it. So it would require somebody that wants to be here full time as an employee. So I would say
Mm.
those are the ways that I've looked at it.
Yeah. And that's really, aligns, I think, with your philosophy and sort of value around being in your zone of genius where it's sort of joy and ease and fun. So that makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. What functions currently are full time? So we know that there's sort of sales is a contract position,
Yes.
podcast production is a contract position. What positions are full time currently as at the time of recording?
Yes, at the time of recording. I love you say at the time of recording. That's so good
Well,
because
right?
things change,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
So at the time of recording, full time is operations, like all of that back end. Bless
Yeah.
our operations person and the systems and the processes, the CRM, that Zapier, all like that whole language that I now know of, and this and that and this. I do none of that, aligning it to Stripe and all of
Yeah.
that. So
I
we
know.
have somebody that is on that, and he is absolutely incredible. And then we have someone that also oversees our whole marketing efforts and also does our copywriting, email marketing, but is really overseeing the whole thing as well. And that was really important. That was something that we were contracting out at one point. But I don't know about you, Eleanor, but sometimes like things come up for me. The way that I work as well is like, oh, I've got this idea. And we wanna have people that can execute on that idea fairly quickly because we move very
Yeah.
quickly when we've got something. And then we have somebody with content creation and more social media. And now we've also brought somebody in so those are the employee hires. So the content creation person, we're together. So when I was in Miami with my inner circle, my elite group in September, she's there with me as well. getting content. So she travels with me too a lot. So we have a retreat in Whistler coming up in 2025. She will be there for the whole thing. So that's who we have full time right now. And then
Mm.
what we decided to do was hire a virtual assistant. So this is not full time, not employee, for some of our like just things, more client things, responding to emails, my calendar, and things like that. We used to have that as a full time role.
Right.
So we're trying something differently. So as of recording, that's what it is, and it could be changing.
What I love about you sharing this story and experience are sort of two things. One, I do think it's very valuable for women entrepreneurs and business owners to talk about how we built our teams and the transitions that we've made and how our teams have started to look different. Because I do notice that often there can be either a lack of confidence or a huge amount of pressure and stories around what a good leader should look like when people make mistakes building team, which is 1,000,000% normal. So,
Yes,
like,
please.
one
Yes.
gajillion percent normal. Um, I find that there's a lot of shame. Like I've certainly experienced, experiencing shame around that, or I should have known better, or I should have done better. And so I do really appreciate when, just sharing stories about here's the mistakes I made. I tried this, it didn't work. Um, and quite honestly, I don't know how I could have done it other than gone through it, to kind of learn. And so I appreciate that vulnerability, but I also really appreciate how um, you sort of have this, you're modeling a very flexible approach to team building. What does the business need now? What feels joyful and
Mhm.
easy, and fun now? And so there is a philosophy there around, there
Yes.
is sort of this central philosophy, and that's the rule, is the philosophy, not that it should be this or it should be sort of arbitrary ways of growing your business.
Yeah, it's so and so I feel like we can have it all, the all that we want.
Yeah.
And so sometimes also helping your business is having support at home. And that was also something that I think of as part of my team. Even being able to have somebody help me with cleaning, like all of that sort of thing. Meals,
Yeah.
that's part of my team for my business because
Yeah.
that allows me to operate at a high level, at a peak level. The other two people that I think are very important to my team that I brought on early on that made a big difference, and for anybody listening, I would say lawyer and bookkeeper.
Oh,
The
yeah.
legal part and
Yeah.
the bookkeeping part. Now, this was part of my self-image change as well when I was in six figures. I would say in the kind of early, low six figures. I was still doing my, like, I was still, like, in my receipts. I was in the weeds with bookkeeping, but I also had this, thought that nobody will be able to figure out my system. And then, not the expert. No, because my system is apparently just way too complicated. And I remember when my system of like the shoebox of receipts, and I remember when Jane, who's been with me from then to seven figures, which is really fun when you have people that have been with you, like
Totally.
they've seen it. And that's a contract position. She's not full time, she's not an employee. And she said to me, she said, just please just give it to me. I promise you I can do it. And I did, and not only did that open up space for me because it was one of the things I hated in my business, and you don't wanna hate the money piece in your business because that creates a block. I will tell you the minute I did that, my revenue increased, and I'll tell you why,
Mm.
because I had capacity to receive more. I wasn't afraid of receiving more because I knew there was somebody that could handle it and it wasn't gonna bog me down. Even with the legal
Oh,
part of
yeah.
it too. Okay, we can take a moment for that, Eleanor, right?
Yeah, when I think learning to be aware of the places where I feel that receiving would create more pain,
Yeah.
and then
Yes.
looking at that and just being with that and just kind of gently dealing with that is so key. It's one of the most important things you can do. So I just had to take a pause for that because I thought it was so critical.
Yes, yes. And how we do one thing is how we do all things. And it's like, where am because then and I think especially in that $250,000 place as well, like there's a lot you can do just by yourself, right?
Yeah.
But then you become the bottleneck in it.
Yeah.
And then when we think about getting out of the bottleneck, many times we think I've got to work harder in a way. It's kind of odd, but it's really where can I get support? How can I make this easy for me? And then because part of us will be afraid to scale because we think it will hurt us. It will hurt our families, it will hurt our health, and so we don't actually want to, so we have resistance to it. And we think we're holding on to doing things because we're saving money or that's what's best, but really what we're doing is we're stopping ourselves from growing. And then because everything is always in motion, we're just going to go backwards then. And then we tell ourselves it
Yeah.
doesn't work. So a bookkeeper and then a lawyer so that you feel safe to scale, so that you feel like you've got that person in your corner. Because again, I mean, I'm not a lawyer. When I see, contracts and things like that, that's also self-image, not only having contracts, but enforcing it. And I was just talking to our mutual friend, Andrea Henry, yesterday, my lawyer, and we went out for lunch and I was saying it's so interesting how even at this point, as I'm scaling and going to another level for myself, and I mentioned I'm working with a consultant. Gosh, this is crazy, Eleanor. He says to me, he says, "Okay, I really need to get into your programs, your offerings. I really need to see everything you're doing." Of course he does. "So send me an NDA." So he's telling me to send him an NDA because this man's a professional. In my mind, am like, like this happened. I'm like, do I really need to do that? Like, I like him. Like, we're good and stuff. And then I was like, but I catch it now. And then I'm like, Andrea, can you please
I'm
create
sure
an
Andrea set
NDA?
you straight.
Yeah. I'm like, can you create an NDA so I can send it to this person? But it's amazing, Eleanor, how even with everything that I've done, so I want people to know I am under construction. We are
Yeah.
ever evolving. And I'm still even catching myself wanting to go back to, well, we don't really need that, or I don't want to come across like too, I don't know, pushy or like, oh, like I don't trust him when he has
Yeah.
asked for it. So I think, but all of this happens as you also start, but see, it's easy for me now because I have someone on my team that I can just say, Andrea, can you do this? If I
Yeah.
didn't have that person on my team, I probably wouldn't do it, or it would take a lot for me to do it. If that
Yeah.
makes sense, Eleanor. Yeah.
That's so fascinating. The way that team actually facilitates the identity change that we need to make to create the next level. Yeah. Fascinating. Hina, I could talk to you forever.
Yes.
It's been such a great conversation, but I'd love to kind of wrap up with you sharing for folks who are have heard this sort of undercurrent of identity change,
Yeah.
and are really deeply curious to learn more about you and the morning calls and just how they can kind of soak into your world a little bit. What's the best place for them to go?
Instagram is the best for me, Eleanor, and that's at Coach with Hina.
There we go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eleanor. This was a pleasure. Thank you.